The morning of my son's wedding should have been filled with nothing but pride and joy. A day for mothers to beam at their children, to hold their heads high as they walked into the church pews, dressed in their Sunday best. But my morning began with something else, entirely a storm of buzzing notifications on my phone. By 7 o'clock, I already had 12 missed calls. First came Jordan, my only son, calling back to back like a man whose hair was on fire. Then Sloan, his fiancée, with a string of voicemails that started sweet and slipped quickly into sharp. The wedding planner chimed in. 2, her number flashing across my screen as if she believed I was her assistant. Even Brianna, Sloan's influencer sister, left a dramatic voice note. Naomi, we need you now. This isn't funny. But I didn't pick up. I didn't even glance at the phone as it rattled against the counter. Instead, I stood at my kitchen window in my robe, spooning sugar into my coffee, humming a gospel hymn my mama used to sing. Outside. The Atlanta sun was just peeking over the magnolia trees, casting a golden glow across the yard. Rufus, my old hound dog, snored at my feet, unbothered by the chaos lighting up my phone. When I finally spoke, it wasn't to them. It was to myself. I won't be anyone's unpaid nanny today. And I meant every word. See? Somewhere between the engagement party and the rehearsal dinner, my family decided I wasn't a guest of honor. I wasn't the mother of the groom. No, I was free labor. They expected me to corral 15 children, yes. 15 from morning until night. Toddlers in diapers, first graders with sticky fingers, preteens already rolling their eyes at everything. They had a whole kids program drawn up, complete with nap mats, snack schedules, and even bedtime stories. And every line of it had one name attached to mine. Here's the catch. No one ever asked me, not my son and not Sloan, not the planner. They simply assumed, as though my years as a school teacher and grandmother automatically enrolled me as their staff for the evening. I might be 65, but I know exactly what that was disrespect dressed up as convenience. So the night before, after connecting the dots, I sat at my dining room table with my laptop open. My friend Gloria, retired paralegal and church sister, had already helped me gather what I needed: venue policies, insurance requirements, childcare regulations. The stack of paperwork beside me wasn't just paper, it was armor. At precisely 7:00 a.m., with Rufus watching curiously from the rug, I pressed send on an email addressed to the wedding planner, the venue manager, the officiant, my son, and his bride-to-be. The subject line, clarification of role, Naomi Price, mother of groom. I kept my tone calm, professional, but firm. I explained that I would be attending the wedding as a guest, nothing more, nothing less, for liability reasons. I could not assume responsibility for supervising 15 minors. Attached were 2 documents, the venue's own insurance clause, highlighted in yellow, stating that only licensed childcare providers could oversee groups of children on the property. Otherwise, the bar and dance floor would be closed. A rate sheet from PlaySafe Sitters, a professional childcare service in Atlanta, outlining their prices $28 to $35 per child, per hour, with a 4-hour minimum. That meant somewhere between $1,680 and $2,100 for the night. To make it airtight, I also attached a letter from PlaySafe Sitters confirming their availability that very day. They could be at the barn by 3 o'clock sharp so long as the Parker wedding party paid the invoice in full before services began. Then I signed it simply, Naomi Price, mother of the groom. With that, I closed my laptop, cradled my coffee cup, and felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. Because for once, I wasn't letting myself be cornered into servitude. And let me tell you, if you've ever been the reliable one in your family, you know exactly what I mean. People call it generosity. They say you're so dependable, but underneath, they're banking on your silence, on your willingness to do the work no one else wants to do. And most of the time, you swallow it because you love them, because rocking the boat feels worse than rowing it alone. But that morning, I decided the boat could rock without me. Now, Let me pause and ask you, because I know some of you have been here before. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have smiled, tied on your sensible flats, and spent the night wiping noses while everyone else sipped champagne? Or would you have stood your ground, even if it meant watching your son's big day wobble? Drop it in the comments below. Team keep the peace or team set the boundaries, because I already knew which team I was on. By the time the phone buzzed for the 13th time, I had slipped it into silent mode and walked back to my bedroom. Hanging there on the closet door was my navy blue dress, the one I'd picked weeks ago, with matching heels and a wide-brimmed hat. This was not a babysitter's outfit. This was the outfit of a woman ready to be seated proudly in the front row, where the mother of the groom belonged. I smoothed the fabric, dabbed perfume on my wrists, and whispered, "Today, Naomi, you walk in as a guest." And then, just as I zipped myself in, my phone lit up again with a voicemail from Jordan. His voice cracked through the speaker. "Mom, please, don't do this. The planner says you sent some kind of email. We need you today. If you don't help, it's all going to fall apart." I listened once, twice, 3 times, and then I set the phone down. Because what Jordan didn't realize yet was that I wasn't ruining anything. I was finally refusing to let myself be ruined. And that, my friends, was only the beginning of the storm that would unravel before 100 wedding guests. To understand how I got to the point of sending that email, you need to know a little about me and the people at the heart of this wedding. My name is Naomi Price. I'm 65 years old, a retired elementary school teacher, and a widow of nearly 10 years. My late husband, Samuel, was a U.S. Army veteran. He passed from heart complications, and since then, I've kept our brick home in Atlanta exactly the way we built it together. My garden still blooms with his favorite azaleas, and the kitchen still smells of collard greens and cornbread on Sundays. I've always been the kind of woman who gives. My life revolved around teaching kids, raising my son Jordan, and serving my community through church programs. At every potluck, folks would look for my peach cobbler first, and when families needed a babysitter last minute, my phone always seemed to ring. I suppose that's how I earned the reputation Dependable Naomi. Jordan is my only child. He's 38 now, working in IT at a healthcare company, a good man, gentle in spirit. Sometimes too gentle. He grew up watching me juggle lesson plans, PTA meetings, and church choir rehearsals, and he knew I'd always be there. But that dependability, the thing that made me proud, also turned into a burden, because Jordan started assuming I'd always pick up the slack, no matter how grown he became. 2 years ago, he met Sloane Parker at a networking event in Atlanta. She was younger than him, early 30s, with a sharp bob haircut and a Pinterest board for every idea she ever had. Sloane worked part-time as an event coordinator, mostly for corporate mixers and bridal showers, though she fancied herself more seasoned than she really was. At first, I thought she was charming. She called me Miss Naomi with a smile, complimented my cooking, and even helped clear the dishes at Thanksgiving. She seemed like the kind of daughter-in-law I'd prayed Jordan would find sweet, ambitious, someone who valued family, but over time, little cracks appeared. Sloane liked things her way. She believed in appearances matching bridesmaid robes, expensive photo backdrops, curated hashtags. She wanted her wedding to feel like something out of a bridal magazine, even if the budget didn't quite stretch that far. Enter me. When Jordan and Sloane announced their engagement, I promised to gift them the dessert table. 40 pounds of homemade treats brownies, pecan bars, peach cobbler, lemon squares, recipes passed down from my grandmother in Alabama. My gift wasn't just food, it was tradition, love baked into every bite. And because I've always had a knack for organizing, I also offered to connect them with caterers who could do a buffet-style dinner at a family discount. I thought I was helping. I thought I was saving them money and stress. But somewhere along the way, Sloane started seeing me less as family and more as staff. Her younger sister, Brianna, didn't help matters. 29, single, and chasing a career as a lifestyle influencer. She had a following of a few thousand on Instagram and thought that made her the authority on everything. Brianna was always filming, always narrating her life for the content. To her, the wedding wasn't a covenant before God. It was a brand deal waiting to happen. I should have known something was off the night of the rehearsal dinner. I walked into Maple Oaks Barn, the rustic venue with whitewashed beams and twinkling fairy lights, and saw a chalkboard sign near the entrance. It read, "Thank you to our amazing ML, Naomi, for providing desserts and childcare. Childcare." I froze right there, holding my casserole dish of mac and cheese. I had never agreed to that. Guests brushed past me, oohing at the decor. But I stood rooted, staring at my own name scribbled in curling chalk letters later that night. I asked Jordan about it in a quiet corner. He looked embarrassed, tugged at his tie, and said, "Sloan must have just assumed. Mom, you love kids. You're so good with them. We thought you'd be happy to help." There it was again, assumption. I wanted to snap right then, but I swallowed my words. I told myself, it's just nerves. It's their big day, don't rock the boat. But inside, I felt the sting. Because let me be clear, I adore children. I spent 30 years teaching them their ABCs, their times tables, their history lessons. I've rocked my grandbabies to sleep and read bedtime stories until my throat was sore. Loving children is not the same as being taken advantage of. Loving children doesn't mean you sign up to be free labor while everyone else drinks champagne. And that brings me to the deeper issue, boundaries. When a woman like me, a woman who's spent her whole life giving, finally says enough, people act shocked. They call it selfish. They say you're ruining things. But the truth is, boundaries are the only way to preserve love. Without them, love turns into servitude. So when Sloan's family started treating me like a babysitter, not a mother of the groom, I knew I had to decide. Either play along and let myself be used, or draw a line so clear that no one could pretend not to see it. That's what set the stage for my email. That's why, when I hit send at 7 a.m. on the morning of the wedding, I felt calmer than I had in months, because the backdrop to this drama wasn't just a wedding. It was years of assumption, years of being dependable Naomi, years of being taken for granted. And now, for the first time, I was saying no. But if you think Sloan and Brianna were going to take that lying down, you'd be mistaken. What unfolded next wasn't just family drama. It was a storm of frantic cover-ups, insurance clauses, crying children, and a dance floor that nearly stayed empty. And it all started with one tiny word that changed everything: no. The thing about red flags is they rarely show up waving like banners. They sneak in quietly, disguised as little jokes, offhand remarks, or details others think you're too distracted to notice. But when you've lived 6.5 decades like I have, you learn how to catch whispers between the lines. The first sign came one afternoon when I stopped by Jordan and Sloan's townhouse to drop off a tray of my lemon squares. They were huddled around the dining table with Brianna, their laptops open, papers scattered everywhere. At first, I thought they were working on seating charts, but when I heard my name, I paused in the hallway. "Okay, so Grandma Naomi is officially our designated supervisor," Brianna said, tapping on her tablet like she was checking off a to-do list. "Kids drop off right after the ceremony, pick up after cake cutting." Sloan laughed, that light little laugh she uses when she's trying to make something sound casual. Perfect. She's basically a pro at this. And it saves us at least a grand. They were talking about dollars saved. My heart sank a little, but I forced a smile when I walked in. None of them flinched. They just shut their laptops like guilty kids caught with candy. I told myself, don't overreact. Naomi, maybe you misheard. But the second sign showed up a week later, at church of all places. One of the women from choir, a friend of Sloan's mother, patted my arm during fellowship hour. "Naomi, you're such a blessing. Sloan told me you're handling the kids' corner during the wedding. 15 little ones. You're a saint." I nearly dropped my styrofoam cup of sweet tea. "Excuse me," I asked, but the woman had already floated away, humming to herself. That night, I logged into the shared Google Drive the wedding party had set up. Most of the files were harmless budget spreadsheets, vendor contracts, timelines, but tucked at the bottom was a tab labeled Childcare Plan. When I opened it, my stomach turned. There it was, in black and white. Supervisor Naomi Price, shift 4, 00 p.m. to 10 p.m. Location side room near catering kitchen, activities snack time, story time, nap mats, games, notes. Naomi can bring educational games. She knows what works. I scrolled down further and felt my cheeks burn. Someone had even typed bedtime story, bring goodnight moon or similar. Goodnight moon. I hadn't read that book since Jordan was in diapers. That was when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. Still, part of me clung to hope that it was just sloppy communication. Maybe they intended to ask me formally. Maybe Jordan thought I'd say yes without blinking, because that's what I'd always done. But then came the third sign, during the rehearsal dinner. While guests mingled and the caterers rushed trays of barbecue into the barn, I spotted the seating chart pinned near the entrance. It was decorated with flowers and elegant calligraphy, everyone's names in neat little boxes. I scanned quickly for mine, expecting to see Mother of the Groom near the head table. Instead, I found my name all the way in the back at a small table next to the catering door. The label above it said Staff Help. I blinked. Sure, my eyes were playing tricks. But there it was, plain as day, before I could speak. Brianna breezed past, filming a video for her followers. "Look at this cute setup," she chirped into her phone. Then, glancing at me, she added offhandedly, "Naomi, we figured it'd be easier if you sat closer to the kids' room. That way you don't have to walk too far, like she was doing me a favor." I felt my jaw tighten, but I swallowed my words again, all through dinner. I sat quietly at my table, while laughter rang from the head table. The only thing louder than the music was the voice in my head screaming, "This is not right." The final straw came in the form of an email sent by mistake. 2 nights before the wedding, a message from the venue, Maple Oaks Barn, popped into my inbox. It was addressed to Sloan, but I was copied accidentally. Subject childcare insurance requirements. Hi, Sloan. Just a reminder, if Mrs. Naomi Price is providing childcare, we'll need a copy of her CPR certification and signed liability waiver by Friday. Otherwise, please provide proof of a licensed childcare provider. Venue policy requires this for groups of 10 or more minors. My hands trembled as I read it. Not only had they slotted me in as childcare, but they'd put my name on official documents tied to insurance and liability. I pictured it 15 children running wild, one of them scraping a knee or choking on a cracker, and me, standing there without certification, being held legally responsible. That wasn't just disrespect. That was dangerous by then. Any doubt I had evaporated. The evidence piled up too high to ignore. The offhand remarks, the Google sheet, the seating chart, the venue email, it all pointed to the same truth. They had decided I wasn't a guest. I was the free babysitter, and if I didn't stop it, I'd spend the entire wedding shut away in a side room, while everyone else toasted champagne and danced under the fairy lights. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the glow of my lamp casting shadows on the family photos lining my nightstand. There was Jordan at his high school graduation, Jordan as a boy in his Little League uniform, Jordan standing beside me at Samuel's funeral, gripping my hand like he'd never let go. Tears welled in my eyes, not just from hurt, but from the realization that my son, the boy I'd raised with every ounce of love I had gone along with this plan, whether by silence or agreement. He had let them turn me into staff. I whispered to the empty room, "Not this time, not again." Because what none of them knew was that while they were busy plotting my duties, I had started plotting my boundaries. And when the sun rose on the wedding day, I wouldn't be the woman they thought they could use. I would be something else entirely. The evening after that rehearsal dinner, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every detail, the chalkboard thanking me for childcare, the seating chart that shoved me near the kitchen door, the way Brianna chirped about saving money like I was a coupon clipped from a magazine. I told myself maybe, just maybe, it was all a misunderstanding. but God has a way of showing you the truth when you need it most. At dawn, I opened my laptop to check my email. Sitting in my inbox was a forwarded message from the venue. The subject line made my stomach twist. Childcare confirmation. Naomi Price. I clicked. The email thread revealed everything. Maple Oaks Barn had been emailing Sloan for weeks about our childcare plan. In every exchange, my name was listed as the responsible party. They had written it into their insurance documentation. Supervisor, Mrs. Naomi Price. There it was, in writing, black and white. Not a rumor, not a slip of the tongue, but a binding record that made me liable for 15 children I had never agreed to watch. The message also requested a scanned copy of my CPR certificate, plus a signed liability waiver. My heart thudded. I hadn't been CPR certified since retiring from teaching, and even if I had been, I never consented to be their free service. I closed the laptop, rubbed my temples, and whispered, "Lord, have mercy. They've set me up." Later that morning, while stirring sugar into my tea, my phone buzzed with a new notification and update to the shared wedding folder. Against my better judgment, I clicked. A new PDF had been uploaded. Reception program. Final draft and flipping through. I stopped cold at page 3. Under special thanks, it read endless gratitude to Naomi Price for desserts, decor, and keeping our little guests safe all night. I almost laughed at the audacity. Safe all night, as though I'd signed up for overnight camp duty. My hands shook with anger. Not only had they written me in as staff, but they were planning to announce it in front of 150 people. That wasn't just disrespect. That was humiliation waiting to happen. I needed to know if Jordan understood the extent of this, so I called him. "Hey, Mom," he answered, his voice chipper. "Big day tomorrow. You excited, Jordan?" I said carefully. "Why is my name on insurance forms for childcare at the venue?" There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "Finally," he stammered. Mom, I think Sloan just filled in your name. It wasn't a big deal. You love kids. Right, I love my grandbabies. Jordan, I love my students. That doesn't mean I'm responsible for the entire guest list's children while you dance." He sighed. "Mom, it's just to save money. Sitters are expensive, and you're so good at this. Sloan said you'd be happy to help." There it was. The words I dreaded but knew were coming. Sloan said you'd be happy to help. Not once had anyone asked me. Not once had they given me a choice. They'd written my name into documents, programs, and promises to other parents, all without my consent. I hung up before I said something I'd regret, but the proof kept piling up. That afternoon, while checking my banking app, I noticed a charge I didn't recognize, $250 to a company called Photo Bliss Backdrops. My card on file had been used the week before. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this was. Sloan and Brianna had borrowed my card when I placed the deposit for a sheet cake as part of my dessert contribution. Somehow, my payment information had been saved, and now it had been used to book their trendy photo booth backdrop without asking, without reimbursing me. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. My mind flashed back to all the times I'd quietly covered for Jordan growing up the extra groceries, the gas money slipped into his glove box when he was in college, the rent check I mailed when he and Sloan were starting out. I had always given freely. But this was different. This wasn't generosity. This was theft dressed as entitlement. I forwarded the charge to my bank with a dispute claim. Then I texted Gloria. "You were right. They've crossed a line. I have proof now." She called me immediately. "Naomi, listen to me. Do not let them bully you. You've got written emails, insurance documents, charges on your card. That's more than enough. If they want childcare, they'll have to pay a licensed service. If they want backdrops, they'll have to pay themselves." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "But Gloria," I whispered, "what about Jordan? He's my son. He's in the middle of all this." Her voice softened. "Sometimes the best lesson a grown child can learn is that his mama isn't a doormat. Boundaries teach respect. And right now, Naomi, respect is what's missing." That night, I pulled out the wedding program draft and stared at the words again, keeping our little guests safe all night. My name. Printed like it was a foregone conclusion. I could already picture it. Parents handing me diaper bags, juice boxes, tablets, and favorite stuffed animals. Me locked away in some side room while laughter floated from the dance floor. And if anything went wrong, if a child tripped, if one got lost, I'd be the one blamed. My name was on the paperwork. After all, the proof was undeniable now. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me being sensitive. This was documented, deliberate, and dangerous. And in that moment, as I laid the papers across my dining table, I knew I had a choice: stay silent and become the free nanny they expected, or stand up, risk their anger, and protect my dignity. I folded my hands, bowed my head, and prayed aloud. Lord, give me the strength to choose myself this time. And as I lifted my head, I felt something settle inside me, calm, clear, steady. The evidence was on my side. Now it was time to decide how to use it. Once you've seen the truth in black and white, there's no unseeing it. And by then, the truth was spread across my dining table emails, program drafts, a disputed charge on my bank account, proof stacked so high it felt like bricks on my chest. But evidence alone doesn't solve a problem. Evidence is just the spark. The real fire comes when you decide what to do with it. That week, I chose not to scream. I chose not to storm into their townhouse, slap papers on the table, and demand explanations. No, I'd done that kind of thing before in smaller battles, and it only earned me the label of dramatic. This time, I decided to be quiet, watchful, strategic, because when people underestimate you, silence is the sharpest blade you can hold. The first move I made was simple. I called Maple Oaks Barn myself. The venue manager, Ms. Alvarez, answered on the second ring. Her voice was brisk, professional, but softened when she recognized my name. Mrs. Price, she said warmly. We're so honored to host your son's wedding. I cleared my throat. I need to ask you something directly. About childcare. Your email listed me as supervisor. Can you clarify your policy? She sighed. Our insurance is very clear for more than 10 minors. We require a licensed childcare provider on site, certified in CPR, background checked, insured. Without that, we're liable. And if the conditions aren't met, I have authority to close the bar and suspend dancing until they are. I let her words sink in, then asked, so if I'm not licensed and something happens, who bears the responsibility? You would. Mrs. Price, she said gently. Your name is on the paperwork. I thanked her, hung up, and pressed my palm to my forehead. Imagine that: a scraped knee, a peanut allergy, a runaway toddler and me dragged into court at 65 because my future daughter-in-law didn't want to pay a sitter. That conversation sealed it. I would not be their scapegoat. The second move was to probe the planner. I asked her casually at the rehearsal dinner about contingency plans for the children. She froze, fiddled with her clipboard, and mumbled, Naomi, you're the plan. I smiled sweetly. Oh, that's funny, because I never agreed to that. Her eyes widened. She flipped to another page, muttered something about schedules, and scurried off. Now, that told me everything I needed to know. The planner wasn't behind it. She was just following Sloane's lead. The third move was harder, confronting Jordan, even gently. I invited him to lunch at a quiet diner outside town. He arrived in his work polo, looking tired but hopeful, as though this wedding were the finish line of a marathon, over sweet tea and fried chicken. I leaned in. Jordan, I said, I need to ask you one question, and I want the truth. Did you know they put my name on the insurance forms for childcare? He blinked, then looked down at his plate. Mom, I thought it was just a formality. Sloane said you'd be fine with it. My fork clinked against my plate. A formality, son. Do you understand what liability means if a child gets hurt? I could lose everything I own. My house, my savings, my peace. He rubbed his face with his hand. I didn't think about it like that. That's the problem. Jordan, I said softly. You didn't think. "You just assumed," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Mom." But his apology felt paper thin, because behind it was still the belief that I'd cave, like I always had, that night. I called Gloria again. She listened, then chuckled darkly. "Naomi, they've boxed themselves in. You don't need to yell. Just let their own mistakes collapse on them. All you have to do is step aside." Her advice was tempting, but stepping aside required preparation. If I pulled out without warning, they'd spin it as me abandoning them. I needed a paper trail that showed I never agreed in the first place. So I started gathering. I took screenshots of every mention of my name in the childcare files. I printed the venue's insurance clause, highlighting the section that proved I wasn't qualified. I filed the bank dispute for the $250 Brianna had charged. I even drafted a short statement: "I am a guest, not staff. Any representation otherwise is false." It wasn't anger driving me, now it was clarity. But clarity didn't erase the hurt. One evening, as I sat flipping through family albums, I came across a photo of Jordan at age 6, grinning with missing teeth, holding a homemade Mother's Day card. Inside, in crooked letters, he had written, "Mom, you do everything. You are my hero." I traced the letters with my finger and whispered, "When did hero turn into housemaid?" The weight of betrayal pressed down harder than the paperwork ever could, because it wasn't just Sloan or Brianna. It was my son, the boy who once clung to my skirts, who now let them treat me like staff. But sometimes pain is fuel. That night, I tucked the photo back into its sleeve and stood taller. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to teach them a lesson in respect they'd never forget. Still, I played the long game. At the rehearsal, when Sloan handed me a stack of juice boxes for the kids' room, I smiled and set them aside. When Brianna chirped about Grandma Naomi's shift, I nodded politely and excused myself. I didn't argue. I didn't show my hand. Because the louder you protest, the more they think you'll cave. But when you go silent, when you let them believe you've accepted it, that's when the ground shakes hardest beneath them later. And shake it would. The day of the wedding was coming fast. And I had all the evidence lined up like dominoes. All it would take was one push to send them crashing. I zipped my binder closed, tucked it into my tote, and whispered to myself, "Naomi, you're ready." But little did I know, the biggest revelation hadn't even hit yet. The morning before the wedding, I stopped by the venue to drop off my dessert tray's 40 pounds of sugar, butter, and family tradition stacked neatly in labeled containers. I had baked for days: peach cobbler, lemon squares, brownies dusted with powdered sugar, pecan bars glazed just right. As I carried them inside, I overheard voices echoing from the bridal suite. I paused near the doorway, balancing 2 trays on my hip. "She'll never say no," Brianna was saying, her voice high and certain. "Naomi lives for this. Besides, she'd rather wrangle kids than be in photos anyway." Sloan laughed. That soft laugh she used when buttering someone up. "Exactly. We've given her something useful to do. Keeps her busy. Keeps her out of the way. Plus, can you imagine paying for 15 kids to have sitters? That's nearly $1,000. We just saved the budget." My grip tightened on the tray. Useful. Out of the way. My heart pounded. Then came Jordan's voice. My son. "Let's not make a big deal," he muttered. "Mom? She's always helped before. I don't see why this time should be different." "No." "Jordan," Brianna shot back. "She didn't say it. You said it for her. And that's fine. She's family. That's what family's for." The room erupted in laughter. I felt the blood drain from my face. Up until that moment, I had hoped Jordan didn't know the full picture, that maybe he thought I'd volunteered, or that Sloan had exaggerated. But hearing him join in, hearing him dismiss me as though my time and dignity were his to bargain with, that pierced deeper than any paperwork ever could. I backed away quietly, set the trays down on a catering cart, and slipped outside. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped my car keys. It wasn't just Sloan's plan. It wasn't just Brianna's greed. My own son had chosen convenience over respect. That was the first reveal Jordan wasn't simply caught in the middle. He was complicit. I drove home in silence, the desserts forgotten. Rufus, my hound dog, wagged his tail when I walked through the door, but I barely noticed. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. All those years late nights sewing his Halloween costumes, extra tutoring sessions to get him through algebra, scrimping on groceries to pay for his college textbooks, and now, at 38, he thought his mama was nothing more than free help. I felt humiliated, but I also felt something else rising inside me, resolve. That night, I called Gloria. My voice shook as I relayed what I'd heard. She whistled low. "Baby, you've got your proof. Not just in writing now in their own words. He showed you who he is right now. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" I exhaled slowly. I've been thinking. They expect me to show up, keep quiet, and play along. What if I don't? What if I walk in as a guest, sit in the front row, and let their whole plan crumble? Gloria chuckled. "Naomi, that would be sweeter than your peach cobbler. But if you really want this lesson to stick, you need to let their own arrogance do the damage." We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour, plotting. By the time I hung up, my course was set, but the universe wasn't done dropping bombs. The following morning, the wedding day itself, I woke to another email notification, this time from the venue. Subject urgent, childcare policy enforcement. The email explained that because no licensed childcare provider had submitted credentials, the bar and dance floor would remain closed until one arrived. The venue was covering itself legally, following their own policy. The kicker. My name was still listed as the supervisor. And just like that, I realized something. Not only had they planned to use me, but they had built the entire reception on that assumption. Without me, or without hiring professionals at the last minute, the celebration couldn't go forward as planned. That was the second part of the first reveal. Their entire dream wedding rested on my compliance. I leaned back in my chair, coffee steaming in my hands, and smiled for the first time in days, because suddenly, the power shifted. They had written me into their plans without asking. They had humiliated me on programs and seating charts. They had stolen from my bank card. They had laughed about how convenient it was to use me, but now, the venue itself had tied their success directly to me. And I, Naomi Price, had no intention of showing up as their nanny. Instead, I drafted a new email, calm, polite, ironclad. I attached the venue's policy again. I attached PlaySafe Sitter's rate sheet, and I closed with one line that would haunt them all day. "I will attend today's wedding as a guest, not staff. Please plan accordingly." I hit send, closed my laptop, and went to zip myself into my navy dress. By 9 o'clock, the frantic calls started again. Jordan, Sloan, even Brianna. My voicemail filled with desperate pleas. "Mom, please. We can't afford this sitter last minute, Naomi. You're embarrassing us. Just please go along. You're ruining everything. Don't be selfish." But I'd heard enough. Because the first reveal had already been made clear, I was never supposed to be the honored mother of the groom. I was their unpaid staff. And now, with the venue's policies and my refusal, they were about to find out what happens when you mistake love for servitude. I turned off my phone, slipped on my heels, and whispered to my reflection in the mirror, today, "Naomi, you're not backing down." What none of them knew was that this was only the first twist. The deeper betrayal, the one that would break the whole day wide open, was still waiting in the wings. By the time the clock struck 3, guests were already filing into Maple Oak's barn, dressed in their Sunday best. The air buzzed with chatter. The scent of gardenias drifted from the floral arrangements, and the string quartet tuned their violins. I arrived in my navy blue dress and wide-brimmed hat. Rufus left at home with Gloria's grandson. Walking through the entrance, I felt every eye turn toward me. Some smiled politely, but others whispered. They had already heard. I could tell. The whispers followed me like perfume. "She's not doing the kids. Who's watching them?" Then I heard the bar isn't opening until they figure it out. I kept my chin high, heels clicking against the polished floorboards, and took my seat in the front row exactly where the mother of the groom belonged. At first, things seemed manageable. The ceremony began, sunlight streaming through the tall barn windows as Jordan and Sloane exchanged vows. But even as I watched my son say I do, I noticed restless movement in the back. Children fidgeted, toddlers cried, parents whispered anxiously to each other. By the time the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, 2 kids were already chasing each other down the aisle. A toddler's shriek cut through the applause. Parents tried to corral them, but with no plan in place. Chaos spilled like water from a cracked dam. The first cracks in their perfect wedding had begun, but the real collapse came at the reception, as guests drifted into the hall for dinner. The bar remained shuttered. A sign taped across it read, "Closed until childcare provider present." The dance floor stood roped off, untouched. Confusion turned to frustration. Guests murmured, craned their necks, demanded answers. Parents clutched diaper bags, unsure where to send their kids. One woman snapped. Sloane promised someone would be watching them. I can't enjoy a thing with my twins running wild. I sat calmly at my table, sipping sweet tea, watching it unfold. Sloane's face went pale as she rushed to the planner. Brianna paced with her phone out, muttering something about damage control. Jordan rubbed his temples, already sweating through his suit. Then came the announcement. The planner, voice shaky, tapped a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, the bar and dance floor will remain closed until childcare arrangements are resolved. We appreciate your patience." Gasps filled the room. A groomsman groaned. "What's the point of an open bar if it's not open from across the room?" A mother shouted. "Where's Naomi? She was supposed to handle this." Heads turned. Dozens of eyes landed on me. I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, placed my glass down, and said clearly, "I am here as a guest. I came here as the mother of the groom, not the babysitter. If childcare was promised, it wasn't promised by me." The silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Jordan's face crumpled. "Mom," he whispered, but it was too late. The truth was out in the open. That was when the second twist struck, harder than the first. The venue manager, Ms. Alvarez, marched to the microphone with a clipboard in hand. "To clarify," she announced, "we were provided documentation listing Mrs. Naomi Price as the designated childcare supervisor. Without a licensed provider present, we cannot permit alcohol service or open the dance floor. Liability laws are strict." She held up the paper for all to see, my name printed in bold. Gasps rippled again. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but not from shame, from vindication. Because now everyone could see it, I hadn't refused at the last minute. I had been set up. Sloane stumbled forward, grabbing the mic. "It's just a misunderstanding," she cried. Naomi agreed. She just forgot. I rose to my feet, calm but firm. "No, Sloane, I never agreed. Not once. You and Brianna assumed. You put my name on forms I never signed, and you laughed about it. I heard you myself." A collective gasp spread like wildfire. Guests turned, eyes darting between the bride and me. Jordan froze, mouth open, unable to deny it. The weight of my words sank in. I hadn't just refused childcare, I had revealed the scheme itself. And with that, the wedding's polished veneer shattered. Parents began to grumble louder. "So who's watching the kids?" one demanded. Another shook her head. "We drove 2 hours for this." In the corner, 2 toddlers toppled a floral arrangement. A boy smeared icing from the cake across his suit jacket. A little girl tugged at the microphone cord, nearly pulling it down. The chaos they had tried to dump on me now engulfed them instead, and I sat, serene as a queen, watching their empire of assumptions burn. The venue manager leaned into the mic again. "Unless a licensed provider arrives within the hour, we cannot legally serve alcohol. If you wish, I can provide the contact information of PlaySafe Sitters is available tonight. Their rate would run close to $2,000 for the evening, depending on the head count, if the bride and groom care to pay. Perhaps this can still be salvaged." She glanced at me knowingly. I simply folded my hands. Brianna sputtered, "We don't have that kind of money right now." A murmur of discontent spread through the guests. The dream reception, the champagne toasts, the choreographed dances, the Instagram-worthy photos was slipping away before their eyes. Jordan finally turned to me. Desperation etched across his face. "Mom, please, just this once. Help us." I met his gaze steadily. "Son, I've helped you your whole life. But today, helping you means teaching you the one lesson you've avoided: respect. You cannot plan my life for me. You cannot sign my name. You cannot use me." He dropped his head into his hands. That was the climax, the breaking point, the moment where love, betrayal, and truth collided in front of 100 witnesses. And the beauty of it, I hadn't lifted a finger in anger. I had simply stepped aside. Their own deceit had undone them. But even as I sat back down, heart pounding, I knew the story wasn't over. Because if I stopped here, they'd eventually spin it as me being difficult. If I wanted the lesson to last, I needed to follow through. I needed to show them what intelligent revenge really looked like, and my plan was already in motion. When the ceremony chaos first began, people assumed I'd eventually cave. They expected me to step in with my teacher's voice, line up the little ones, and salvage the evening. But what they didn't realize was that I had already prepared for this. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be smart, quiet, and devastatingly effective. The seeds had been planted days before. Step 1. The paper trail. After discovering my name on the child care plan and venue insurance forms, I knew denials alone wouldn't protect me. Sloan was slick. She could turn any conversation around, make me look forgetful, even manipulative. So I built my defense in writing. I printed the venue's childcare policy and highlighted the section that forbade unlicensed supervisors. I copied the childcare spreadsheet with Supervisor Naomi Price in bold. I kept the rehearsal program draft that thanked me for keeping our little guests safe. And I stapled them neatly into a packet labeled evidence for my protection. If anyone tried to spin a story, I had documents to shut it down. Step 2. The professional option. Gloria had suggested this one. "Naomi," she told me, "you've got to give them a rope. Not to save them, but to show the crowd they had every chance to do right." So I contacted PlaySafe Sitters, the top childcare agency in Atlanta. I explained the situation, and they sympathized. They even wrote me a formal letter they were available to cover the wedding that Saturday, provided the family signed a contract and paid in full. Their rates were $30 per child, per hour, minimum 4 hours, close to $1,800 for the night. I forwarded that letter to Ms. Alvarez, the venue manager, with one line. "This is the only option that complies with your insurance policy. I will not be supervising." That ensured she couldn't claim ignorance later. And it planted the first domino if the family refused to hire professionals. The responsibility was all theirs. Step 3, financial exposure. I hadn't forgotten the $250 they slipped onto my card, nor the dozens of small favors I'd covered over the months. So I made some calls. The bakery, the florist, the DJ. I explained politely that all future invoices needed to go directly to the bride and groom, not me. That way. When the planner came asking about balances, my hands were clean, and if Jordan or Sloan tried to tell anyone I'd promised to pay, the paper trail would say otherwise. Step 4. The envelope the night before the wedding. I sat at my dining room table, pen in hand, and wrote a short letter. I, Naomi Price, have never agreed to provide childcare for this event. Any documents suggesting otherwise are false. I am attending solely as a guest. Responsibility for childcare rests with the bride and groom. I signed and dated it, then slipped it into an envelope along with my evidence packet. Across the front, I wrote one word: truth. I planned to hand it to Jordan at exactly the right moment, not to humiliate him, but to force him to face reality in front of witnesses. Step 5. My exit plan. Revenge isn't complete unless you protect your peace. I arranged with Gloria to ride together if things went badly. We'd slip out quietly and spend the evening at a diner on the edge of town. She even promised to bring her iPad so we could track social media and see the fallout in real time. I wasn't about to be trapped in that barn once the storm broke. The morning of the wedding. I woke before dawn. Instead of rushing to cook or wrangle children, I made myself a slow breakfast: eggs, grits, a slice of buttered toast. Rufus snoozed at my feet. I felt calmer than I had in months. At 8:00 a.m., the first frantic call came from Jordan. I let it go to voicemail, then Sloan, then Brianna. I silenced the phone and poured myself another cup of coffee. They still thought I could be pressured. They still thought I'd buckle under guilt. But what they didn't know was that the trap had already been set. When I arrived at the barn later that afternoon, dressed in navy and pearls, the signs of unraveling were everywhere. Children running wild, guests whispering about the closed bar, the planner darting from table to table, clipboard shaking in her hand. I walked in with my tote bag resting on my arm, the envelope inside, heavy as a gavel. I sat at the front row, where mothers of grooms belong, and folded my hands. From across the room, Brianna spotted me and made a beeline, phone camera already on. "Naomi," she chirped. "The kids are waiting for you in the side room." I cut her off with a raised eyebrow. "No, Brianna. I'm here as a guest. You'll figure something out." Her face fell, but before she could argue, a toddler shrieked and she scurried away. I exhaled slowly, heart pounding but steady. The time was near. Because I wasn't just planning to refuse, I was planning to reveal, to peel back every layer of assumption, entitlement, and deceit until the whole room saw the truth. And when that happened, the fallout wouldn't just sting, it would scar. Still, I prayed quietly in my seat. "Lord, let this be the lesson they need, not out of vengeance, but out of love. Because love without respect isn't love at all." The strings of the quartet swelled. The guests turned in their chairs. The ceremony began. And I sat, calm as stone, knowing that by night's end, nothing in my family would ever be the same again. The reception hall buzzed with tension thick enough to choke on. Children darted under tables, guests shifted uncomfortably, and the unopened bar loomed like a taunt. It was exactly the moment I had been waiting for. Ms. Alvarez, the venue manager, once again approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, unless a licensed childcare provider arrives, we cannot open alcohol service. It is a liability issue. We thank you for your understanding." Groans erupted across the room. Someone shouted, "What kind of wedding is this?" Another guest muttered, "We flew all the way from Chicago for..." This Jordan's face turned crimson. Sloan wrung her bouquet until petals fell onto the floor. Brianna whispered furiously into her phone, likely calling anyone she knew who had ever babysat a child. That's when I stood. The scraping of my chair against the wood silenced the room. I walked calmly to the DJ's booth and tapped the microphone. My voice, clear and steady, carried across the barn. "My name is Naomi Price," I began, "and I want to make something perfectly clear. I never agreed to watch children tonight. Not mine, not yours, not anyone's. My role here is the same as yours to be a guest." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Parents turned to one another. Confusion etched on their faces. But I continued, holding up the thick envelope from my purse. Someone else decided to sign my name without my consent. Someone thought it was easier to volunteer me than to pay a professional. And now you're all dealing with the consequences, gasps erupted. Jordan froze. Sloane's eyes widened in horror. Brianna mouthed, "Oh my God." I handed the envelope to Miss Alvarez. She opened it swiftly and pulled out the documents, the childcare spreadsheet, the venue insurance clause, my signed letter denying responsibility. She held them up like evidence in a courtroom. "This is exactly what we needed," she announced. "Proof that Mrs. Price is not responsible. Price is not. Liability lies with the bride and groom." The barn fell into stunned silence. A guest broke it with a sharp laugh. "So they tried to make their mama the free babysitter on her son's wedding day," another voice added. "That's low. Parents began gathering their children, some visibly angry. One woman snapped, "You told me Naomi had it covered, that's why I even brought my twins." Another shook her head, muttering, "Unbelievable." The humiliation on Sloane's face was almost theatrical. Her cheeks blotched red, her mascara streaked. She tried to stammer out a defense, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Jordan, though his expression cut deeper. He looked at me with a mix of shame and desperation, as if only in that moment did he realize what had been done in his name. But I wasn't finished. I leaned into the mic one last time. For those of you who feel inconvenienced, PlaySafe Sitters is available tonight. Their rate is $1,800 for the evening. If the bride and groom care to pay, perhaps this can still be salvaged. I slipped the mic back onto its stand, calm, controlled, deadly. The room buzzed with shocked chatter. Guests openly debated whether to stay or leave. A father with 3 kids stormed toward the door, muttering, "We're done here." The planner hurried to Sloane, hissing about unpaid balances. The florist cornered Brianna, demanding a check. The DJ refused to play another song until he was paid in cash. Every unpaid corner of their wedding suddenly surfaced. The dominoes I had lined up so carefully were falling, one after another. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to scold. All I had to do was stand back and let the truth unravel their perfect facade. And then I did what they never expected I left. Gloria and I slipped out quietly, the evening air cool against my cheeks. As we reached her car, I heard a child crying behind us, the sound echoing through the barn doors. Gloria chuckled, unlocking the passenger side. "Naomi, you didn't just pull the rug out, you burned the whole carpet." I smiled faintly, sliding into the seat. I didn't burn anything. I just stopped cleaning up their mess. At the diner 20 miles down the road, we ordered fried catfish and sweet tea, our laughter bubbling between bites. Gloria refreshed her phone constantly, scrolling through Facebook and Instagram. "Look at this," she said, shoving her phone toward me. Someone had already posted a video from the reception in it. My voice rang clear. I never agreed to watch children tonight. The caption read, "Mother of the groom shuts down wedding chaos." Within hours. The clip had dozens of shares. By morning, it would likely have hundreds. "Oh, Lord," I muttered, sipping my tea. "I didn't mean for it to go viral." Gloria grinned. "But it did, and maybe that's the best part. Now they can't rewrite the story." She was right. For once, the narrative wasn't in Sloane or Brianna's control. It was mine. Back at the barn, the fallout grew. Several families left early, dragging restless children. Guests grumbled loudly, some even demanding refunds for gifts. The open bar never opened. The cake was cut early to appease the restless crowd, but a child knocked half of it onto the floor. By the end of the night, what was supposed to be a glittering celebration looked more like a cautionary tale, and I was nowhere near the wreckage. Instead, I sat in a booth at the diner, the taste of fried catfish lingering on my tongue, the sound of Gloria's laughter warming my heart. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely, unapologetically free, but revenge, even sweet revenge, comes with ripples. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls. Jordan, dozens of times. Texts from relatives, some furious, some proud. Even a message from the pastor's wife, Naomi. "You did the right thing." Boundaries are godly too. I let the phone buzz. I wasn't ready to answer. Because revenge wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger. A reckoning. A new chapter. And as I folded my napkin and smiled at Gloria, I knew one thing for certain. Sloane and Brianna thought they'd taught me my place, but it was me who had taught them theirs. The morning after the wedding, I sat on my porch with a steaming cup of chicory coffee. Rufus lay curled at my feet, his soft snores mixing with the chirping sparrows. For once, the weight in my chest felt lighter. I had drawn a line, and I hadn't crossed it, not even for my only son. My phone buzzed on the table, relentless. 20 to 8 missed calls from Jordan, 12 from numbers I didn't recognize. A flood of texts, some pleading, some angry, some supportive. I didn't pick up, not yet, instead. I opened Facebook, and there it was, the video, the clip of me at the mic, declaring, "I never agreed to watch children tonight. My role here is the same as yours, to be a guest." It had gone viral overnight. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. Some called me a hero, some said I was cruel. Others debated in long threads about boundaries, family, and respect. And that was exactly what I wanted. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but a conversation. Around noon, Jordan finally showed up at my doorstep. He looked like he hadn't slept, his tux wrinkled, hair unkempt. He stood there like a boy, not a 32-year-old man, his eyes heavy with shame. "Mom," he whispered, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He sank into my couch, burying his face in his hands. It was a disaster, he admitted. Half the guests left early. The bar never opened. The pictures, God, Mom. The pictures are ruined. Kids screaming in the background. People are saying it was the worst wedding they've ever been to. I sat across from him, calm as still water. And why was that? Jordan. He swallowed hard. Because I let them use you, because I didn't stop them. Finally, the words I'd been waiting for. "You didn't just let them use me," I corrected softly. "You signed me up for something without asking. You made me invisible at your own wedding. And now you've seen what happens when you treat people like servants instead of family. At first I thought you'd eventually give in, like you always did. But when you didn't, I saw how wrong we'd been." He nodded, tears brimming. "I'm sorry. Mom, truly, I don't know what I was thinking." I reached for his hand, squeezed it. "I believe you're sorry, son, but sorry is just a word unless it's followed by change." The next day, Sloane showed up, alone, no makeup, no entourage, just jeans, sneakers, and swollen eyes. She stood on my porch holding a casserole dish, green bean casserole, the Southern peace offering. "Mrs. Price," she began, her voice shaky. "I owe you an apology." I raised a brow. "Do you?" She nodded, clutching the dish tighter. I tried to control everything, and truthfully, it wasn't just me. My mother insisted we not waste money on a sitter. She told me, "That's what mothers are for." And I listened to her instead of respecting you. I thought if I made you the babysitter, it would keep you out of the spotlight. And that was wrong. It was disrespectful. You're Jordan's mother. You raised him into the man I married, and instead of honoring you, I humiliated you. Her words sounded rehearsed, but her eyes told a different story. They were raw, vulnerable. I let the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably. Then I said, "Sloane, I don't need a daughter-in-law who cooks for me. I need one who respects me. Respect means asking before assuming. Respect means seeing me as family, not free labor." She blinked back tears. "Can we start over?" That question hung heavy in the air. After a long pause, I nodded once. "We can, but understand this start over means new rules. I choose how I participate. I choose when I say yes and when I say no, and you'll respect both." She exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. "Yes, ma'am." Weeks passed. Slowly, things shifted. For the first time in years. My phone didn't buzz with last-minute favors. Jordan and Sloane began managing their own household. They even hired a professional sitter one weekend and bragged about how wonderful it was. At church, folks whispered, "That's Naomi, the one from the video." Some women pulled me aside, thanking me. One confessed, "I've been babysitting my grandkids every weekend, and my daughter never once asked if I wanted to. Watching you gave me courage to finally say no." That was the real revenge. Not the ruined wedding, not the viral video, but the ripple effect. My boundaries gave other women permission to draw their own. 6 months later, the final twist came. I was invited to dinner at Jordan and Sloane's house. The table was set simply roast chicken, cornbread, collard greens. Halfway through the meal, Sloane cleared her throat. "There's something we want to tell you," she said, glancing at Jordan. He reached for her hand, smiling nervously. Mom, we're expecting you're going to be a grandmother." Tears pricked my eyes. For all the chaos, all the hurt, this moment still filled me with joy. But then Sloane added, "Carefully, and we want you to decide what kind of grandma you want to be. No assumptions, no obligations. Whatever role you choose, we'll respect it." That was the sweetest revenge of all, to have my dignity acknowledged, to be given choice. I smiled, reaching across the table. "Then here's my answer. I'll be the kind of grandma who spoils with love, not exhaustion, the kind who visits with joy, not duty, and the kind who says no when she needs to." Jordan and Sloane nodded, tears glistening in their eyes, and for the first time, I believed them. Months later, when I rocked my newborn grandbaby in my arms, I whispered softly, "Your grandma fought for this, for respect, for choice, for love without strings, because love without respect isn't love at all, it's servitude, and I was done serving where I wasn't valued." Final message to the audience. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else's happiness. It's about reclaiming your own dignity. It's about teaching people that love has boundaries and that those boundaries make it stronger, not weaker. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have walked away or would you have caved in for the sake of peace? Drop your thoughts below, because I know this story has two sides. And remember, saying no is sometimes the most powerful way of saying yes to yourself. Your turn if you were Naomi. Would you have walked away from that wedding or stayed and sacrificed your peace for family? Tell me in the comments, because your voice might be the encouragement another woman needs tonight. If this story touched you, tap like and share it with someone carrying too much on her shoulders. For more cinematic family dramas filled with secrets, betrayals, and sweet revenge told with compassion, subscribe to Voice of Neva and ring the bell. We bring you new 60 to 75-minute stories every week. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for reflecting. See you next time.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.